part of the game is this. He only eats the He didn't say anything about any of these white boys. And none of these white boys function like that. And Katt, they never hurt people. And he does it all the time. And but nigga, I didn't hear anything that you did wrong.
Hey folks, Hollywood is still serving up drama, and this time, it's like the roles have done a complete 180. If you've been tuned in, you'd know that Katt Williams shook things up a few weeks ago, breaking the internet with an explosive interview where he didn't mince words, calling out heavyweights like Steve Harvey, Kevin Hart, Ludacris, and a bunch more. Seriously, he aired out all the dirty laundry, and the interview? Well, it's now clocked over a whopping 50 million views on YouTube. Yeah, that's how massive it was. But here's the twist. Now it looks like Katt Williams might be the one in hot water. Word on the street is that none other than Dave Chappelle is allegedly dubbing Katt a hypocrite. Rumor has it that Chappelle is supposedly having a chat with Williams, accusing him of betraying black comedians. It's like nobody's safe, and the spotlight can swing in any direction. Looks like it might just be Katt Williams' time to navigate the drama. Now you're probably wondering, how exactly did Katt Williams supposedly betray his fellow black comedians? The details are unfolding, and it's turning into quite the Hollywood saga. Let's get into it. Alright, so Dave Chappelle isn't holding back when it comes to responding to Katt Williams' viral interview on Club Shay Shay. Dave hit up Monterey's at the Hollywood Improv on a Friday night and spilled some serious tea about Katt's interview antics. So Dave's not just a little miff, he's downright peeved, and you can feel the heat in his stand-up set. His main Katt went and fired shots at fellow black comedians. Dave was like, he ethered N. He didn't say anything about any of these white boys. None of these white boys function like that. Translation: Dave's pointing out that in the world of comedy, he's not seeing white comedians tearing each other apart like Katt did with his own community. Dave didn't mince words, suggesting that hurt people, but he also owned up to being a bit damaged himself. The real kicker? Dave's not out here throwing shade at his fellow comics despite his own struggles. And you know what? He's got a point. Why go after the black comedians when there's a whole system at play? It's like Dave saying, if you're gonna call out Hollywood's power structure, don't just aim at the puppet. Go after the ones pulling the strings. Talk about the planners, not just the plant. Dave's dropping truth bombs, emphasizing that any real conversation about power in the entertainment industry needs to include talking about the influence of white folk. If you're serious about shaking up the room and addressing industry issues, you start at the top, at the head honchos. Going after your peers might make you the talk of the town, but to make real change, you've got to tackle the root of the problem. All right, for those who've been living under a rock, let's dive into what Katt Williams spilled about these comedians and see if he really went too far. First up on the hit list is none other than Steve Harvey. Let's rewind the clock to December 2008 when Steve Harvey and Katt Williams found themselves in the headlines. These two haven't exactly been best buds for over a decade, and there's a story behind it. So, Katt Williams decided to call out Steve Harvey right before a Christmas season show, and things got wild. Picture this: Jamie Foxx, who was a radio host at the time, throws shade into the mix by playing a clip of Williams dissing Steve Harvey. Katt, on the phone, goes on a rant saying, "I want to apologize for what's gonna happen," hinting at their upcoming joint comedy gig. But here's the kicker. He drops the bomb, telling Steve that once he hits the stage, it's game over for him as the king of comedy. Steve Harvey then calls in, baffled by the whole situation. He tells Jamie and the crew, "I've always been cool with Katt," explaining that back in LA, he didn't even know who Katt Williams was. Imagine that, Steve Harvey asking, "Whoever Katt Williams is, call me." So, Katt Williams didn't hold back in the recent interview, laying into Steve Harvey. Katt straight up called out Steve for supposedly being jealous of Bernie Mac, spilling the tea on their years-long. According to Katt, Bernie felt Steve was trying to mess with his movie roles, even attempting to snatch a role in Ocean's 11, creating major tension. Katt went on to claim that Steve, in an appearance on Club Shay Shay, tried to act all nonchalant about not wanting to be a movie star. But, according to Katt, Steve was secretly trying to compete with Bernie Mac for movie roles. And that's not all. Katt also accused Steve of stealing material from another comedian, Mark Curry, and allegedly lying about being homeless. In Katt's words, the same Steve that went to go watch Mark Curry do his whole sitcom and then stole everything Mark Curry had. Now, Steve got a sitcom where he's the principal, wearing a suit and rocking a high-top fade, making all black men think he's got the best lineup in the business. And it's a man unit, not the real deal.
Go watch Mark Curry do his whole sitcom and then stole everything Mark Curry had. It's the same that hated on Bernie with this same thing. I didn't want to be a movie star. No, you couldn't be a movie star.
Katt also called Steve out for supposedly lying about being homeless, saying, "That's my story. That's not his story. Steve Harvey was never homeless. When Mark Curry was touring with him 25 years ago, he was making $3,000 a show in cash and doing 5 shows a week. They just tell the stories." Katt didn't stop there, diving into Steve's marital history, claiming Steve said it was his first wife who got him where he is, then switched it up with the next wife, who thinks like a man. Katt questioned Steve's credibility and authenticity, especially when it comes to claiming to be the king of comedy. He even spilled that he was offered the chance to be the 4th king of comedy, but turned it down because of how Steve allegedly treated Bernie Mac. Katt said, "Because the whole time Bernie was here, you were acting like you were funnier than him. You stop it. That man was funnier than all of y'all." Katt's not holding back, calling Steve out on his claims and keeping it real about how comedy works.
This is like Steve Harvey telling people he used to be homeless. That's my story. That's not his story. Steve Harvey wasn't never homeless.
But hold up, there's more to this Katt Williams saga. He might not just be blowing smoke. Guess who's supposedly backing him up? None other than Mark Curry. Yeah, that's right, Mark Curry's name is in the mix. So here's the scoop. Comedians really don't like it when someone swipes their jokes. And guess who's gotten on the wrong side of quite a few funny folks? Yep, our man Steve Harvey. In the wild world of showbiz, especially comedy, things can get messy real quick. Celebs borrowing each other's art, or in this case, straight up stealing jokes. It's like a comedy minefield. Mark Curry is making some noise, putting Steve Harvey on blast for allegedly lifting his material on a very public stage. Mark Curry, the comic who rocked the industry early on, is pointing fingers at Steve Harvey, claiming Harvey's not the stand-up guy his brand makes him out to be. According to Curry's spill, Steve Harvey's comedy success might not have been as smooth as he led us to believe. It's like he's saying, hey, those things that made you love Steve Harvey might not have all come from the man himself. All right, so in the entertainment biz, things can get a bit fuzzy, right? I mean, allegations and drama are practically part of the package. But here's the thing, Steve Harvey isn't exactly new to this whole mess. Over the years, he's found himself in a tangle of similar problems. Now add Mark Curry's recent claims to the mix, and it's like, hold up, is Steve Harvey not the flawless life coach we all thought he was? We might be on the brink of uncovering a slice of his success story that didn't quite make it into his best-selling book. Normally, when someone's throwing accusations around, it's because they're not exactly sitting on top of the success mountain, right? Well, that's not the case with Mark Curry. And that's what's keeping this whole Steve Harvey drama in the headlines. It's not your typical scenario. Mark Curry is not your average accuser. Back in the 90s, when becoming a star was like hitting the jackpot, Mark was living the dream. Started in stand-up, globe-trotted, packed out comedy spots, the whole 9 yards. Now he has taken aim at some big shots in the entertainment game, calling them out as nothing but joke-stealing frauds. And guess who's in the spotlight first? Steve Harvey. So, in a couple of recent chats, Mark spilled the beans, claiming that Steve Harvey straight up recycled his material for jokes on his shows. And this isn't a new Mark's been throwing shade about Steve lifting his jokes way back when on Harvey's NBC talk show. Alright, so there's this explosive video, and it's got Steve Harvey and Mark Curry tangled up in some serious comedy. Mark's claiming that Steve, who used to host Little Big Shots on NBC, swiped not 1, but 2 of his jokes. And get this, Mark says he already confronted Steve about it in the past, but the alleged joke thievery kept happening.
The thing with Steve Harvey is that he used my material on both his platforms.
Yeah.
After I talked to him, I saw him at Def Jam, I went up and talked to him, I said, man, you're using my material.
Now Mark, who's 62, spilled the tea to TMZ, saying that Steve jacked his Halloween bit, a personal story about growing up. But Steve wasn't having any of it. He straight up denied the accusations, saying Mark couldn't even name the supposedly stolen joke. Things got heated real quick, with Steve telling Mark to get a life and get a career.
Mark Curry says that you're still stealing his jokes.
Hey man, listen to me.
Yeah.
Now this, I'm getting sick of this right here.
Yeah.
Mark Curry need to grow up.
Steve went on a rant saying he hasn't stolen a joke in 35 years and dared Mark to name the joke he's talking about. He even threw in a grow-up man for good measure. But here's the kicker. Mark wasn't just making stuff up. The comedian came armed with receipts, proving his point and turning up the heat in this comedy feud. Mark Curry took his beef with Steve Harvey to Instagram and dropped some serious receipts in a video that's now deleted. Basically, he called out Steve for allegedly stealing a bunch of jokes from him for his show. In this video, Mark compared an episode from his 90s sitcom, Hanging with Mr. Cooper, where he talked about rocking a brown box as a UPS costume for Halloween. Surprise, surprise, Steve made the exact same joke in a 2015 episode of his show.
Bullshit talk show he had. And he did all my Halloween material one Halloween. I'm watching, somebody called me and said, man, homeboy doing your material. So he did my whole Halloween run.
All right, let's talk about the whole stealing joke scene. Another person Katt didn't hold back on was Cedric the Entertainer. He went in, calling Cedric a walrus, and straight up accusing him of plagiarism. According to Katt, Cedric denied jacking his jokes by saying, "It don't line up," but Katt wasn't having any of it. He pointed out that he dropped the joke on TV in 2018, and Cedric supposedly came to see him at the Comedy Store doing it in 2019. And guess what? Cedric later did the same joke on the Kings of Comedy. Katt's like, "What doesn't line up here?" He even threw in that it was a televised joke, and Mark Curry played a part in punching it up to its prime.
Cedric told you when you asked him, did you steal Cat Williams' joke? Yeah. He said, it don't line up. 2 years later, he's doing that as his last joke on the Kings of Comedy. And he's doing it verbatim. He's just changed my car into a spaceship.
And that's not all. Katt didn't stop at Cedric. He swung back around to Steve Harvey before circling right back to Cedric. This time, he didn't pull punches, calling Cedric a walrus, and basically saying he's not living up to that entertainer title. Katt claimed Cedric can't sing, can't dance, and can't write jokes. He even threw shade at Cedric's comedy specials, saying they're so bad they're not even on Netflix or Tubi.
We found out he can't sing, can't dance, and doesn't write jokes. He did 4 comedy specials. They're so bad, Shannon, they're not available on Netflix or Tubi.
Now, next up on the list is Kevin Hart. For those of you who don't know about the ongoing showdown between Katt Williams and Kevin Hart, you might recall that the beef traces back to the 2008 film Fool's Gold. Williams was initially set to take the lead, but his legal issues at the time forced him to pass on the gig, which involved filming Down Under in Australia. Enter Kevin Hart, who swooped in and snagged the role instead. According to The Grapevine, that's where the sparks of tension between Williams and Hart first ignited. Now, we're talking about more than a decade of simmering folks. It's like a slow-cooked drama stew that's finally reaching its boiling point. Williams, with all his comedic flair, is now taking aim at Kevin Hart. When the topic of Kevin Hart came up in his conversation with Shannon, Katt straight up alleged that Hart might be an industry plant. He questioned the lightning speed of Kevin's success, highlighting how he landed a sitcom and led a movie, Soul Plane, all in his first year in Los Angeles. According to Katt, this raises eyebrows and makes Kevin's early history seem a bit like a mystery. He already had his deals when he got here. Have we heard of a comedian that came to LA, and in his first year in LA, he had his own sitcom on network television and had his own movie called Soul Plane that he was leading? No. We've never heard of that before that person, or since that person, he continued, saying. What do you think a plant is? Maybe people don't understand the definition of these words.
You heard of a comedian that came to LA, and in his first year in LA, he had his own sitcom on network television and had his own movie called Soul Plane that he was leading. What do you think a plant is?
Katt didn't shy away from getting into the nitty-gritty, expressing his concern about letting people who might not be truthful create their own narratives unchecked. He brought up the power imbalance, mentioning how liars have all the assets and resources, leaving the rest of the folks to play catch-up. Katt even challenged the idea that these resources factor in when it comes to the truth. In Katt's words, he expressed concern about letting individuals who might not be truthful create their own stories unchecked, especially when they have abundant resources. Despite the accusations, Katt seemed aware of the potential backlash, acknowledging that behind his back, he might be seen as a bitter and jealous comedian. When asked if he feared any backlash, Williams responded, "Satan can't create anything. That includes blessings for his people. That's why, you know what the Noah 1 job of somebody that sold their soul in Hollywood is to act like it didn't happen." So, Thursday morning rolls around, and guess what? Kevin Hart isn't one to take things lying down. He fired back at Katt Williams in a post shared on platform X, giving his take on the latest diss. Kevin didn't just clap back, he also took the opportunity to plug his newest project, which is set to hit Netflix. He said, "Gotta get that anger up, oucha champ. It's honestly sad. In the meantime, please enjoy my movie trailer to my next film, Lift, which will be dropping on Netflix in 8 days. Also, during an explosive rant on the Club Shay Shay podcast, Kevin Hart had this to say when asked about being called out by comedian Katt Williams. "You don't entertain the circus. You watch it. When a lion comes out and rides the bike, you don't think about it too hard. You just go, okay, that's crazy. The lion is riding a bike. And then you go home and enjoy the rest of your day." Hart responded during an interview with Fox 5's Kevin McCarthy about his new action comedy, Lift. "I don't feed into the stuff at all at the end of the day. It's all entertaining to a certain degree," Hart said. He added he's sure his fans will fact-check claims like the ones made against him by Williams. "I just don't have the time for it. There's too much going on," Hart said. So diving more into why Katt Williams has this whole Kevin Hart is an industry plant theory, it goes back to a Hollywood rumor that's been circulating for quite a while. Meanwhile, there's this talk that entertainers are kind of blackmailed into wearing a dress on screen, almost like a rite of passage before they can level up in the fame game. And it's not just Katt Williams who's been talking about this. Even Dave Chappelle has touched on it. In 2006, during an appearance on OPR, Dave Chappelle recalled being asked to wear a dress for a movie he did with Martin Lawrence. He walks into the trailer and sees a dress, thinking it's the wrong one. Turns out it's for a scene where Martin's character sneaks out of jail by dressing Chappelle as a prostitute. Chappelle's like, "Nah, I'm not doing that. It wasn't in the discussion." They try to pressure him, saying it's a hilarious bit, but he stands his ground, saying he doesn't need a dress to be funny. The whole thing gets intense with writers, directors, and producers pushing, but Chappelle sticks to his guns. In the end, they come up with a new scene without the dress, and he's left wondering, how did you write that so fast? Dave just didn't vibe with it, not because wearing a dress is an issue on its own, but because he felt the industry was trying to corner black artists into doing whatever it took for success. They kept hounding him until they figured out he wouldn't budge. Dave revealed this whole experience was an eye-opener. It took being told to wear a dress for him to connect the dots and realize this wasn't just his struggle. Lots of other black men had been asked to do the same. Martin Lawrence rocked it in Big Mama's House. Eddie Murphy pulled it off in the Nutty Professor series, and Jamie Foxx left a mark with his unforgettable Ugly Wanda on In Living Color. Then you've got the Wayans brothers trying their hand at it with White Chicks. Oh, and we can't forget the less successful Juwanna Man. Yeah, some would rather forget that one. In the mix of all this, Tyler Perry takes the cake with his Madea franchise. So back when the trend of black comedians wearing dresses was sweeping Hollywood, Kevin Hart joined the conversation, dropping some wisdom about artists needing to safeguard their brand and not overstep certain boundaries. He made it clear that up until that point, he hadn't faced any challenges that clashed with his personal beliefs. When the topic of the notorious dress scenario came up, Kevin was like, "No way, not for me. Gotta set those boundaries, protect the brand." But hold on, here's where it gets interesting. Just a year later, Kevin finds himself donning a dress for an SNL skit. Fans weren't having it. They accused him of being a sellout, calling him out for going back on his words about protecting the brand.
Is 9-year-old Oscar nominee convention.
So what's the deal? Well, some folks are thinking it's just Kevin's turn to go through the Hollywood rite of passage. You know, the whole wear a dress, join the club thing that was trending. It's like a bizarre initiation that some entertainers seem to face at some point. Now let's talk Ludacris. Katt Williams went all out on his podcast episode, dropping some serious claims. According to Katt, both him and Ludacris were at a crossroads, invited to some Illuminati thing where one of them had to make a big decision. Apparently, they were equal at the start, but it came down to cutting off all their hair and ditching the sideburn game. The plot thickens when Katt spills that the next person in line was set to snag a cool $200 million, getting $10 million a pop for 20 movies. And guess what? That person turned out to be Ludacris, and Katt Williams was the other player in the game.
We're gonna pay him $10 million a movie to do 20 movies. And that's how the conversation happened. One of those persons turned out to be Ludacris, and the other person turned out to be Katt Williams.
Oh, but Katt didn't stop there. He got personal. He threw some shade at Luda's wife, Eudoxia Mbugengwe, calling her Luda's light-skinned, ugly-faced wife.
They ended up with a light-skinned, ugly-faced wife that's never done it. Remember I told you that if I say that, it applied to 7 people?
Yes.
It's part of what they give you.
Now, Luda didn't take that lying down. Nope, he hit back with some fire, dropping a freestyle over Kanye West's Devil in a New Dress beat. Luda spitting bars like, "Never been Illuminati, only ill Luda naughty / and I only left with B when coming from any party." The online crowd was all over it, showing some love for Luda's lyrical comeback. And it didn't stop there. Luda got real about life. He rapped about being married with kids, the evolution of his journey. No clout chasing, no saying stuff for likes. He's all about that authentic vibe. Luda even paid homage to the late John Singleton and gave props to earning every Fast and Furious check. Plus, he threw in a nod to his signature style, the afro with sideburns. And of course, he dropped a line about addiction on the rise, giving a shout out to comedians to check their temperature. Next up is none other than Diddy. Katt Williams didn't hold back, and he dished out some serious shade. He claimed that at various points in his career, he turned down $50 million offers 4 times just to keep his integrity intact. But then, he shifted gears and started calling out Diddy, who's been in some legal hot water with 4 women accusing him of SA, including his ex, Cassie. Katt got real explicit talking about protecting his virgin hole and how he had to say no to Diddy's partying ways. He even boasted about having receipts for everything he spilled during the interview, giving him the freedom to share all the juicy details. And get this, earlier in the conversation, he took pride in making it this far in Hollywood while still claiming to have a virgin a-hole and never having done certain things. But the real zinger was when Katt suggested that Diddy likes to play the ownership card when it comes to women. He said, "When I see people's wives and stuff, I don't even look at them. I don't want to look at nothing I don't want to have because I know how blessed I am. If I look at it, I got it. That's how Diddy be feeling. Now, with all the info on the table, it's hard to argue with Katt's take on this one. Guys, the video was a roller coaster ride with a laundry list of names: Tyler Perry, Jonathan Majors, Michael Blackson, Ricky Smiley, and a bunch more. Some responded to Katt's claims, others stayed quiet, but one thing's for sure, it was a lot to process. Now, while Dave didn't fully back up everything Katt said, he did defend a couple of Katt's targets, specifically Cedric the Entertainer and Steve Harvey. But hold up, it wasn't all roses. Both Cedric and Steve caught a few stray shots in the process. Cedric got hit harder, with Dave saying it makes no sense to go after him for supposedly stealing jokes because he's old and fat. Yeah, those are some bold words. You gotta wonder if Cedric's raising an eyebrow at Dave for those descriptors. And then there's Steve Harvey. Dave defended him, pointing out that he's out of the stand-up game and more focused on hosting shows like Family Feud and Judge Steve Harvey. Dave even threw in his own Katt Williams impersonation, complete with profanity and a high-pitched voice, just to keep things spicy. He also called out Katt for not really owning up to his own actions, and instead choosing to focus on what other comedians did to each other.
And he does it all the time. This one and this one. But nigga, I didn't hear anything that you did wrong. He didn't do nothing wrong. Katt didn't do nothing wrong.
So, what's the verdict, folks? Do you think Katt Williams went overboard with what he said about these black comedians, or is there some truth to it? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and let's keep the conversation rolling. Catch you in the next video.